Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and a warm welcome to the global ACA community to our 5th annual ACA World Convention, our first fully virtual convention. While this is a difficult time for many of us, we see that moments like this bring us together, and for that we are grateful for our ACA recovery. We are doing 13 meetings over 26 hours for this convention. Our theme this year is Global Connections Strengthening Our Recovery. At last count, we had over 2,500 ACAs registered from over 30 countries. ACA is truly a global fellowship. My name is Stephen, and I'm an adult child and your meeting's host and secretary. Please remember our spiritual principle of anonymity, as this meeting is being webcast around the world and will also be recorded and distributed later. We ask that participants please rename yourself if your last name is showing. Only our active speakers are unmuted. When we ask for volunteers or member shares, please use the raise hand feature under participants to be called on, and the host will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. Also note that we turned off cameras for meeting safety. Please join me in opening our meeting with the ACA Serenity Prayer in whatever language or way that is best for you. Take a deep breath. God, grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, courage to change the one I can, and the wisdom to know that one is me. We meet to share the experience we had as children growing up in an alcoholic or dysfunctional home. That experience infected us then, and it affects us today. By practicing the 12 steps, by focusing on the solution, and by accepting a higher power of our understanding, we find freedom from the effects of alcoholism or other family dysfunction. We identify with the problem and learn to live in the solution, one day at a time. Could I have a volunteer to read the problem? James, Ryan, would you read the problem?
So many of us found that we had several characteristics in common as a result of being brought up in an alcoholic or dysfunctional household. We had come to feel isolated and uneasy with other people, especially authority figures. To protect ourselves, we became people pleasers even though we lost our own identities in the process. All the same, we would mistake any personal criticism as a threat. We either became alcoholics or practiced other addictive behavior ourselves, or married them, or both. Failing that, we found other compulsive personalities such as workaholic to fulfill our sick need for abandonment. We lived life from the standpoint of victims, having an overdeveloped sense of responsibility. We preferred to be concerned with others rather than ourselves. We got guilt feelings when we stood up for ourselves rather than giving in to others. Thus, we became reactors rather than actors, letting others take the initiative. We were dependent personalities, terrified of abandonment, willing to do almost anything to hold on to a relationship in order not to be abandoned emotionally. Yet we kept choosing insecure relationships because they matched our childhood relationship with alcoholic or dysfunctional parents. These symptoms of the family disease of alcoholism or other dysfunction made us co-victims, those who take on the characteristics of the disease without necessarily ever taking a drink. We learned to keep our feelings down as children and kept them buried as adults. As a result of this conditioning, we confused love with pity, tending to love those who could rescue. Even more self-defeating, we became addicted to excitement in all our affairs, preferring constant upset to workable relationships. This is a description, not an indictment. James.
Thank you, James, and welcome. And I've asked Eileen to read the solution.
I'm Eileen, adult child. The solution. The solution is to become your own loving parent. As ACA becomes a safe place for you, you will find freedom to express all the hurts and fears you have kept inside and to free yourself from the shame and blame that are carryovers from the past. You will become an adult who is imprisoned no longer by childhood reactions. You will recover the child within you, learning to accept and love yourself. The healing begins when we risk moving out of isolation. Feelings and buried memories will return. By gradually releasing the burden of unexpressed grief, we slowly move out of the past. We learn to reparent ourselves with gentleness, humor, love, and respect. This process allows us to see our biological parents as the instruments of our existence. Our actual parent is a higher power whom some of us choose to call God. Although we had alcoholic or dysfunctional parents, our higher power gave us the 12 steps of recovery. This is the action and work that heals us. We use the steps, we use the meetings, we use the telephone. We share our experience, strength, and hope with each other. We learn to restructure our sick thinking one day at a time. When we release our parents from responsibility for our actions today, we become free to make helpful decisions as actors, not reactors. We progress from hurting to healing to helping. We awaken to a sense of wholeness we never knew was possible. By attending these meetings on a regular basis, you will come to see parental alcoholism or family dysfunction for what it is, a disease that infected you as a child and continues to affect you as an adult. You will learn to keep the focus on yourself in the here and now. You will take responsibility for your own life and supply your own parenting. You will not do this alone. Look around you, and you will see others who know how you feel. We will love and encourage you no matter what. We ask you to accept us just as we accept you. This is a spiritual program based on action coming from love. We are sure that as the love grows inside you, you will see beautiful changes in all your relationships, especially with God, yourself, and your parents. Pass.
Thank you, Eileen, and welcome. It is the tradition in San Francisco meetings to read our ACA 12 steps, alternating with Tony A steps, one of our ACA founders. I've asked Conway to read our ACA steps, and I've asked Amina to read Tony A's 12 steps.
Hello, Conway, ACA. ACA 12 steps and Tony A's 12 steps. 1, we admitted we were powerless over the effects of alcoholism or other family dysfunction, that our lives had become unmanageable.
Amina, ACA. We admitted we were powerless over the effects of living with alcoholism and that our lives had become unmanageable.
2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity.
We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could bring us clarity.
3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand God.
We made a decision to practice self-love and to trust in a higher power of our understanding.
4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves.
We made a searching and blameless inventory of our parents because, in essence, we had become them.
5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs.
We admitted to our higher power, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our childhood abandonment.
6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character.
We're entirely ready to begin the healing process with the aid of our higher power.
7, humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings.
We humbly asked our higher power to help us with our healing process.
8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all.
We became willing to open ourselves to receive the unconditional love of our higher power.
9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others.
We became willing to accept our own unconditional love by understanding that our higher power loves us unconditionally.
10, continued to take personal inventory and, when we were wrong, promptly admitted it.
We continue to take personal inventory and to love and approve of ourselves.
11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand God, praying only for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out.
We sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with our higher power, praying only for knowledge of its will for us and the power to carry it out.
12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to others who still suffer and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
We had a spiritual awakening as a result of taking these steps, and we continue to love ourselves and to practice these principles in all of our affairs.
Thank you so much, Conway and Amina, and welcome. You may have related to our readings even if there was no apparent alcoholism or addiction in your home. This is common because dysfunction can occur in a family without the presence of addiction. We welcome you. What you hear at this meeting should remain at the meeting. We do not talk about another person's story or experiences to other people. Please respect the anonymity of those who share today. ACA meetings have one primary purpose: to carry the message to the adult child who still suffers. This is an ACA speaker meeting. Our speakers today are Conway, Amina from San Francisco, California, and Denise from Alaska. Now, please help me welcome our first speaker, Conway, who will speak for 10 to 15 minutes.
Hey, hello everybody. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Awesome. All right. I'm gonna switch off this screen. So if anything happens, Stephen, you might have to text me just because I'm not looking at Zoom. Actually, nope, I can still see you.
Okay.
Wow. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. I'm so glad to get to share for everybody. I hope you are all safe and doing well in this crisis. This is my first time speaking at a meeting, so I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm really glad to be here. And I feel like, I've been in the program for 7 months, and I feel like I have something to give and I have something to share, even having just been in the program for this short amount of time. And I am looking at this opportunity, with joy and with excitement rather than with fear and insecurity. And that's so significant because, if you guys are ACA, which you are, you'll know that fear and insecurity is how we wake up in the morning, and it's how we feel before we go to bed at night. So I'm just really glad to be here. And if you don't relate to what you hear, what you share, I'm a relative newcomer, and if you don't relate, neither did I when I first came in. Things made sense in my head, but I could not connect to what I heard. I couldn't connect to other people's experience. And it wasn't because this is the wrong program or because it doesn't work. I didn't connect because I had a hard time connecting with anybody or with anything. So just as you listen to this meeting, if you're new, I hope that if you hear something that seems like it might be true, like give it an extra listen, because it just might be. Just give it some time. So my story, I guess it starts with my grandpa. He grew up in Minnesota, and when he was in his 20s, he moved to Alaska to escape or to start a new life. His whole family was alcoholics, and it was the story that we're all used to is alcoholism and abuse and just really critical, not loving people. And my grandfather was the one who kind of like took our family and made something of it. He moved to Alaska, this tiny little town, secluded away from anybody and anything. He didn't drink. He was basically, I guess, kind of like a dry drunk. And he ruled with an iron fist. He was proud. He was self-reliant, and he's the patriarch of the family. Everybody answered to him, including his wife. It was obviously the 60s, and that's just the way it was. My dad grew up in that situation, and he was never comfortable in his own skin. He was always picked on. He was always kind of marginalized. He never felt like he belonged or he showed up. And my dad's reaction was to be perfect in every scenario, and to never show any sign of weakness or any sign of vulnerability. By the time I came along, I was the fourth of four boys, and I was a decade behind the rest. So, by the time I was born, I was born into this world of run by men, where there was no vulnerability, there was no There's no ability to ask for help from anybody. And you just had this feeling that whatever it was, you should already know how to do it. You should already know, something without ever going through the phase of not knowing, because that's showing weakness. Something my sponsor says that I love is, you're just a tiny leaf on the tree, and this tree has been growing for a long time, and that's the case for me. So that's kind of the story of how things got started. There was a big difference between the reality of my family and the picture that we painted for the rest of the world. So, on the outside, we were successful. We always strove to be the best. People looked at our family and they looked up to us. And it was such a weird thing as a kid, because that's what it was on the outside, but on the inside, it was a completely different story. On the inside, there was this kind of numbness. There was this disconnectedness. There was, what I'm coming to actually realize was legitimate abuse. There was, there was name calling, there was belittling, there was gaslighting, there was anger, there was unhappiness, there was insecurity, there was fear. There was so much fear. My dad and all of his siblings had this relationship with alcohol where, I wouldn't say they're full-blown alcoholic, but there's just there was all this shame and secrecy around it, because you had to make your own way. You had to do things for yourself, and you had to be in control of your own life. And what came with it was this sense of superiority. Like, I felt internally so inferior and so afraid of everyone and everything, and externally, like, nobody could see that, because we had this huge presentation. We had this huge front that we had to keep up as a family. This is who we are. This is how we want people to see us. And don't you dare let anybody see that you're anything less than that. And not only to the rest of the world, but to the rest of the family. Like, if I couldn't do something, or if I was, if I was feeling bad, there was always a solution, but there was never acceptance for the problem. And so I learned these survival traits. I learned to cope. I learned to deal with it. I learned how to get by. I learned how to fit in. By the time I was 19, I had two things. I had an incredible ability to adapt to pretty much any situation, and to be okay, and to make my way. And I also had this deep sense that something was missing, that something was wrong, that I was, I guess, emotionally just not there. I was unable to connect to other people. And that's kind of when I hit bottom, I guess, is when I moved out. I had all this external success. I had, I was 19 and I was making a living doing what had always been my dream since I was a boy. And I felt like I should feel like a rock star right now, but instead I just feel like I'm lost. I guess I thought that when I moved away from home, things would change, but the truth is that it followed me. The family disease followed me. And I hit bottom. I completely lost, I lost hope. I wasn't able to form a relationship with somebody that wasn't based on fear or doubt or needing that other person to do something. And it's funny, because when I did hit bottom, I asked a friend of mine who I was close with, I told him, I was like, hey, I read this book. I read the book by Russell Brand. It was The Freedom from Our Addiction. And I was like, hey, I read this book and I heard about the 12 steps. And, I think I might try to do the 12 steps. And I was going to do it by myself, not knowing anything. And he was like, you don't really do the 12 steps by yourself. And I was like, how do you know? And he was like, well, I'm in recovery. I'm in AA. And it turns out that a bunch of my friends, or a few of my friends, were in recovery. I had no idea. These were people that were close to me. These are my close friends that I had made in the last couple of years of my life. And it turns out that they were all already working programs, which is crazy. And then the fourth laundry list trait is we either became alcoholics, marry them, or both, or find another compulsive personality, such as a workaholic, to fulfill our sick abandonment needs. And that's what I'd done. I'd surrounded myself with alcoholics. I'd surrounded myself with compulsive people, with emotionally bankrupt people, because these were the only people that I could relate to, because I didn't know how to have a relationship with somebody that wasn't based on needing them to do something, or on, feeling like I didn't deserve to be in a relationship with somebody who would really care about me. So I worked the AA steps. I'm not alcoholic, but I was sober for a year. I worked the AA steps. I got a lot out of it, but at the same time, I never really understood why whenever I went to an AA meeting and I was surrounded by alcoholics, I felt super triggered. And that's when I found ACA. I was like, I realized that, in ACA, our addiction isn't with a substance, it's with people. and it's with the emotions that those people can bring. And you know, you'd think that when I found ACA, my reaction would have been like, yay, I found my people. But in reality, I was like, shit, pardon my language. I was like, these are my people. Like, really? I didn't like the people in ACA when I came in because they reminded me too much of who I didn't want to be. And that was myself. It was too close to home, but I knew that there was something here for me, and so I kept going. And I'm the kind of person who can read the big red book and see my story laid out in front of me and not relate to it. Feel like it's somebody else's story. It's not mine. And that's because I'm so good at disassociating. I'm so good at detaching from the way that I really feel, because that's the only way that I made it through. That's the only way that I became an adult, is through this ability, which started out as a survival trait and then turned into something that I couldn't stop. And it took my sponsor connecting the dots for me. I would come in and I'd say, hey, I feel afraid about this relationship. I feel insecure about this thing. I feel deeply, not worthy about this, whatever it was. And he would say, oh yeah, just like this part of the book. Oh yeah, just like this, the share from the book. Oh yeah, just like this laundry list trait. And I was like, after a while, it started to click that I wasn't the only one, and that there were other people who could help me. And those people are here. Like I said earlier, fear, the shame, and insecurity and still is my default state. It's the first thing I feel when I wake up in the morning. It's the last thing I feel when I go to bed. And I think the great kind of fallacy that we have in this program is we think that we can criticize ourselves into not feeling that way anymore. We think that, I'm a capable person. I'm not helpless. I can go out here. I can make things in the world. I can make these relationships. I can make everybody believe that I'm okay. But when it comes down to it, on the inside, I feel helpless because I don't have the ability myself to change the way that I feel about things. I can have as much success or as much failure on the outside, and I still pretty much feel the same way on the inside. And I think that I can, by changing my outside world enough, I can make myself feel good. But in truth, it makes no difference. Like Camila Cabello could like be standing in front of me being like, hey, I want to be your wife. And I'd just be like, I'd be like, are you sure you got the right guy? Like, I'm afraid, I'm insecure. Like it does not matter what's going on out here, because as long as I'm afraid, as long as I'm insecure, as long as I'm in my default state, it does not matter what's happening in the rest of my life. But the other side of that, and the bloody miracle, is that the opposite is also true. When I'm at peace inside, and when I feel loved, and when I feel connected, I can do things and have relationships that I never thought were possible for me. And I don't just have to survive, I can actually thrive. I don't have to adapt to every environment. I can learn which environment is right for me, and then I can show up there and I can actually be present there. And, I think that ACA is like the map, and, higher power, God, whatever you want to call it, is the solution. There is a solution to this soul wound, to my fear and to my insecurity and to my inability to connect with other people, but that solution doesn't exist within me. I feel like ACA points me in the direction, and if I follow the help from other people and the readings, I find my higher power. I have this analogy that I thought of. Hope maybe you can relate to it. It's that God is like a well, and it's the water that nourishes all of life, the trees, the plants, the birds, the animals. And I'm thirsty. I need something outside of myself. I need this water. And the difference between me being helpless, which is how I feel when I come out of denial, and me being powerless, is that, what keeps me from being helpless is that I have a bucket and I have a rope, and I can go to that well and I can take this action. I don't have the water, but I do have the ability to get it. And that ability is an ACA. It's, you know, through asking for help. And there's no doubt in my mind that asking for help is a superpower. Like, that's the one thing that I've learned in this program that I had no idea that you could do, because that was just, it would never cross my mind. It never crossed my family's mind. It was never like, I don't know how to do this thing. Like, I'm going to go talk to this person who has done what I'm trying to do. But here's this is the crazy thing. If you don't know, if you have a problem, somebody's probably had that problem before. Somebody's probably solved that problem before. And people like to talk about problems they've solved, and you can go up and you can ask somebody for help, and they will tell you how they solved their problem. They'll just straight up tell you, like, you don't have to coax out of them or anything. And like that principle in and of itself, the ability to ask for help, has made me feel like I'm superhuman. And it's so funny, because I know it's such a simple thing. And it hasn't just helped me in my program, it's helped me, you know, at my job, it's helped me in my career, it's helped me with my passion, just like asking people who know, who've been through something that I've been through. How did you get through this? What's the solution? And realizing that by asking for help, I'm not admitting that I'm helpless. I'm admitting that I'm powerless. And that's the first step for me to actually having a solution, versus trying the same solution over and over and over, which, as we all know, doesn't work. So I guess as you guys are, you know, I'm sure a lot of you have a lot more time than me, but if you're new, and for anybody, you know, like, I mess this up all the time, and not a day goes by that I don't experience the same things that I experienced that got me into this program in the first place. But, you know, the trend is a little bit less every single day. And the key is, as long as I'm gentle and loving and respectful, and I can have a sense of humor and laugh at my own problems, maybe not exactly when they're happening, but if I can look back, if I can talk to somebody, if I can ask for help, I found that, like, self-acceptance and self-love is a solution that never wears out. It's something that you can always come back to, no matter where you are. And it's funny, because it seems obvious, you know, but it's not obvious to us. It's not obvious to us at all. We think that if I'm doing something wrong, the solution is to be critical. The solution is to fix the problem. And really, the solution is to realize that maybe the problem has something more to do with something that you did or didn't do, and that it's okay to love yourself, and that it's okay to accept yourself. And no matter what, even if you do need to change your behavior, or you need to do something differently, that self-love is going to get you through it a lot better than the criticism and the fear that we're used to. And that's pretty much it. That's my spiel. That's the experience I've had so far. I'm only 7 months into the program. So hopefully I'll have a lot more soon. I do have a few things that I think are good. Like, I have some practices that I do. And so I'll just share those real quick, because these are things that really get me out of myself. Like, it doesn't matter if I know the solution, because unless I do something, unless I get the bucket and I get the rope and I put it into the well, it doesn't matter that I know that it works. Like, I have to go out and do it in order to get any results. So the things that I do, the first is non-dominant handwriting. So I use my left hand. You know, I think of my left hand as my true self, as my inner child. And this is the part of me that just says however I feel. And then I think of my right hand as, you know, my loving parent, my higher power. And that—
Right. 1 minute.
Yes. Thank you, Stephen. And perfect timing. And, you know, and that right hand is the things I wish my parents had said to me. It's the things that I believe that my higher power will say to me, or is saying to me through my hand. 2, write your own affirmations and say them out loud. I don't know if you guys have ever felt like this, but sometimes I feel like a floating head. Like, the words that come out of my mouth have nothing to do with the way that I feel. And by writing affirmations and saying them out loud, especially in the context of a meditation, and I get real crazy with it. I put on binaural beats and I do ohms and go back and forth. But just by connecting, saying something true out loud is different than thinking something true inside your own head. And the last one, I already said it, but ask for help. It's a superpower. Just ask for help, and realize that by asking for help, you're taking a positive step in your life. You're not saying that you're helpless. You're saying that you're powerless, and more will be revealed. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Conway. Thank you very much. Now our next speaker is Amina. And please help me welcome Amina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amina. I'm an adult child. So first off, I just want to say that I am really feeling really grateful to have this opportunity, as well as being really anxious. But my gratitude for this process is definitely outweighing my anxiety. ACA for me has been something that has been incredibly instrumental in being able to just kind of move through some of these dysfunctional behaviors that I've had my whole life. And one of the things that I have realized, going through this process is that my dysfunctional behaviors that I've had were my survival skills when I was younger. And that is something that I learned in ACA, because before I would look at it as just these character defects, right, that added to my sense of low self-esteem, and just these behavioral patterns that didn't serve me. But what I'm realizing now is that they were a way for me to navigate a system that I didn't really have control over when I was younger. But as an adult, they continued on and they didn't serve me. And so I'm incredibly, incredibly grateful for ACA. Just to kind of give a little bit of background as far as my story is concerned, my story begins with my mom and dad. My mom and dad met in a part of West Africa called Niger. Both of them were teaching in a school out there. My mom was in the Peace Corps. My father is from Mali, but he was also teaching in Niger, and that's where they met. And, you know, I don't know, because I wasn't around, right? I don't know all of the details, but I do know that, you know, they developed this relationship, and from that relationship, they got married, and then my mom got pregnant while she was out there with me. And, you know, a lot of times when we're in situations where we're outside of our own comfort zones and we're in other spaces and we get to meet people, we don't always see all of the parts of them, especially when you're in a space that is time limited, like my mom was when she was in the Peace Corps and then being pregnant. So my mom came back to the United States to have me here at home. And my father came after some difficulty with trying to get him through the immigration process. He came. And the reason that I say all this is because their relationship and the way their cultures came to play were really, was really a big part of the dysfunction. And I say that because, you know, my father was battling two things. He was battling acculturation issues and coming to the United States in the early 80s, and trying to get used to being in a place that is completely different than his home in Mali and what he experienced in Niger. But also what I realized as an adult is that my dad had a lot of unprocessed trauma, and did not have an outlet. And so that came out in some really dysfunctional behaviors. And at the time, growing up, I just thought my dad was a jerk, honestly speaking. And that I thought he was mean and unfeeling. But because of this program and because of therapy, I was able to understand and see my dad in a different light. Not that the things he did didn't hurt me, but that I was able to see him in a different light because I was able to understand that there were these real human situations that he experienced that he didn't have the skills or the ability to process or talk about. So with that being said, growing up, I was with my mom and dad for, they were married and together for a couple of years, and separated pretty early. And I remember during that time that there were arguments that would happen because my dad was incredibly volatile. And even though it was in a different language, as a kid, you can understand when, that when there's a lot of energy and when things are negative, right? And so I remember like during those times going into my bedroom and trying to kind of separate myself from the arguments that were happening. And what I would do is I would create these make-believe like spaces in my head where everybody was happy, I was feeling validated, like I was surrounded by like all this love and warmth and all of this stuff, because what I was doing was I was escaping. And didn't realize that right at age 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way on up. And the other thing that was really difficult was that when the arguing would happen, I would often feel this like over sense of responsibility from my dad. And not that I didn't feel like bad for my mom in this situation, but I think even at a young age, I knew that my mom's like coping skills and her support system was very different. But also my dad was really struggling, and he would tend to talk to me about his struggles and all the things that he was going through, including marriage stuff, financial stuff, his like get rich quick schemes, all of these things. And so as a kid, I was holding that and not realizing that that actually wasn't my job. My job wasn't to support him in that way. My job was to be a kid, but I didn't know that. So when these things would happen, I would tend to try and escape because it was too hard to hold both like the pain of hearing, the things that he would say, but also like being parentified with him in a way and feeling like I had to hold him up. So fast forward, my mom and dad separated, and my mom's side of my family is wonderful and did anything and everything to step up to the plate and, fill that space, that void that my dad had created. But as I'm sure many people know, if you have similar situations or, very different, it doesn't matter how many people try and fill that space. You can feel the love, and I knew that I was being loved, but there's something about having this person who is your parent, who is the person that's supposed to raise you and bring you up. There's something about them not being present, and when they are present, right, being belittling at times and berating and all these things that really works on your psyche. And so as I got older, my relationship with my father really started to change. So even though it wasn't the healthiest when I was younger, that relationship of confidant and friend and daughter and everything else started to change, because what I realized about my dad and I realized about his trauma is that his addiction was two things. He was a rageaholic and was verbally abusive to the women that were in his life, but he was also addicted to women and addicted to relationships. And what that looked like was he loved them a lot and he hated them at the same time. And so it made for this really nasty mix. And as I got older, I started not being a kid anymore and started morphing into, a young woman. And that is when our relationship really changed, because he couldn't relate to me in the same way he could when I was younger and impressionable and looking up to him and everything else. I was becoming the thing that he loved and hated. And so what that looked like was when he would hang out with me, which wasn't often because our visits became few and far between, he would often talk about how I was being brainwashed by my mom, or how I was too American, I was called bitches, I was everything under the sun. And then at the same time, I was like his pride and joy. And you can imagine how confusing that is for a child and for a teenager who's growing up. And so, all of that mixed in made me developed some bad habits. And some of those habits were, or not habits, but behavioral traits were extreme anxiety. One, I didn't know when he was always going to show up, and if he was going to be volatile. And then when he would show up, I didn't know how he was going to show up. And so that uncertainty created this fear within me, like this fear of the unknown, but also like this lack of trust. And this fear of abandonment, because I was like, are you going to be here today? Are you going to be gone tomorrow? I didn't know what that looked like. And there were women who were coming in and out of his life. My dad has been married 6 times at this point. In my 38 years of life, he's been married 6 times. And there was constantly just kind of women coming in, and they would take up his space. And so it really made things difficult, because I just didn't know where I fit into that picture. So to kind of fast forward, all of these things that I experienced with him, the name calling, the unreliability, the broken promises, the berating, the verbal abuse, really kind of cut down on my self-esteem. And I would then replay these themes within the relationships, the intimate relationships that I had in my life. And when it came to being with someone who was healthy, I would do all the things that I said I would never do because they were like my dad, and I would push them away. I would pick fights. I would be manipulative. I would kind of just ghost people, like just not call, not say anything. I would yell. I would, make false accusations, all of these things, because I couldn't handle somebody who was healthy, who wanted to be with me for me, who had healthy boundaries, and who were just all around good people. And so I had to push them away. And even though it hurt in the moment to push people away, I just continued to do it because I just did not know how to handle it. And so what I would do is I would be with people who were not good for me. So you have this person, and this isn't about tooting my own horn or anything like that, but it's just more about my level about my self-esteem, where I have a master's degree in social work, psychiatric social work, where I work with people around their thinking, right? And helping people move through these processes. And at the same time, I'm dating ex-dope dealers and ex-pimps because that's what I thought I deserved at that time. And they were people I could rescue. They were people that I thought would appreciate me in some way, because I felt so badly about myself that is what I thought I deserved. And in that, I would just experience so many ups and downs, because I was basically re-experiencing the experience I had with my father. And that included recklessness, that included cheating, that included people coming, being there and then being gone and not hearing from them. And so it was like my addiction, right, to these relationships, to these people, was being fueled. And so I would feel a physical pain in my heart when I would be with them, right? But then when they weren't there, I would feel that fear of abandonment, right? And I'd be like, oh my God, this is all happening all over again. And I wasn't able to realize, even though this was the work that I do, to realize that I was actually just reliving this trauma of the relationship that I had with my dad. So all of this kind of culminated in a really bad relationship, which could have turned out horrible. At one point in time, I thought that either he was going to hurt me really badly or I could possibly be killed. And it was at that point I had this kind of aha moment after being in this relationship for about 1.5 years that I was like, I have to do something different. And so I started going to therapy. I stopped dating for 2.5 years. And I just really focused on myself, and it was really great. However, I realized that it wasn't enough. And so for a long time, I was just searching, trying to figure out what else is this, because I was still having some of these same behaviors, like acting out childishly when my needs weren't getting met, still trying to be manipulative, and just not being able to communicate, people pleasing, all of that, right? Fear of authority figures, everything, right? That we talk about in the ACA traits. And so this job kind of came out of nowhere, but it was a godsend, which was me working at a chemical dependency program. And at first I was like, I've only worked with kids. How am I going to connect in this space? But as soon as I went in there and I started, observing the groups, everything that they were saying about folks who identified as addicts was me, except for the drugs. And I was like, oh my God, this is everything. This is me. Like, what is happening, right? And so at that point, one of my coworkers and friends said, have you heard of ACA? And she gave me the test, the little quiz, and I think I probably scored a perfect score, right? Because I was like, oh, that's not me. And it totally was. And it was like wonderful and scary all at the same time. It took me about a year and some change to actually go to a meeting because I was so scared. And the first time I went, I remember feeling really grateful, but also being like, these people are weird. And they weren't really weird. It was me being judgmental. And I was being judgmental because I was actually me being scared of change. And so it took me a while again to get back into the meetings, but I went along with one of my other coworkers and friends, and we started a step group. And I just have to say that for me, ACA has really changed my life. I cherish therapy, but I really cherish this program because it has allowed me to see just, how these things that have happened in my life have shaped who I am and my behaviors, but it's allowed me to also see that there's a solution to this problem. And for so long, I thought that there was something that was wrong with me and that there was no one else who could relate to me on this level, that there weren't other people who thought like me. I really thought that there was something really, really, really wrong. And there was something wrong, but it wasn't so unique to me. That there was like a whole community of people who also experienced this and a whole community of people who experience a solution to the problem. And so ACA has been incredible and has been really instrumental in being able to build up my self-esteem, but also in allowing me to see how I like the part that I've played in some of this dysfunction. Not that I'm responsible for what happened to me as a kid. I'm not saying that at all, but the part that I played as an adult and how I can actually get my power back, right, by admitting that I was actually powerless over this disease. And there was something as scary as that is, that was incredibly comforting to me. So I can't sing this program's praises enough because I just would not be where I am today. And even though I am still a current work in progress, I've been in ACA, I think, for about 5 years at this point. It has, like I said, just really, truly changed my life. And to those who are new and might be feeling like how I felt, like, oh, this is weird, this isn't me, I don't know if I want to do this, just keep giving it a try, because I promise you, like, there is a solution to dysfunction. And dysfunction, just like other diseases like addiction, likes to hold on to this belief that things can't change and that you have to stay in this space of this critical talk and not having this loving parent. And I'm a witness to just say that it is possible. I never thought it would be possible, but it is. So I just encourage people to keep giving this a try, keep doing this, create a step group, get a sponsor, because there really is a lot of hope, a lot of strength that comes from this program. And I'm just extremely and truly grateful. So I hope my story wasn't too much of a ramble. I thank you so much for allowing me to share. Thank you, Stephen, for asking me to speak. And I am truly grateful for this process. And ACA works. Keep coming back. It works. So thank you.
Amina, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm grateful for you. All right, now please help me welcome our final speaker, Denise from Alaska.
Hi, I'm Denise. I'm an adult child. And I first want to express my gratitude to the ACA board and the convention volunteers for their creativity and boldness during this pandemic. So instead of canceling everything, they took the challenge and worked incredibly hard to make this 2020 convention virtual. And I think it's incredibly cool and wonderful that they're making it available and free to all adult children around the world. And the change of the virtual convention is giving me the most amazing opportunity of my life. So I'm honored for the privilege to share my story. And when I started my recovery 6 years ago, I would have never believed that I'm sitting here right now doing this, because I could barely be heard in the meetings because I had lost my voice. The other members kept telling me to speak up because they couldn't hear me. So my child was one of dysfunction, chaos, and abuse. And by the time I was 14, I had 4 different last names. And this is because my mother was married 4 times in 12 years. Her first husband, she had 2 children with, and he died. There's a second husband divorced. The third father was alcoholic and had me. And then they divorced. And then the 4th husband adopted me when I was 2 years old. And between my mother and grandmother and all their husbands, there were 19 marriages and only 2 ended in death. So no reason to memorize that. Don't worry about it. It's just, just to give you an idea. So my mother's story was a tragic one. She was abandoned by her mother as a baby and raised by a very cruel aunt who abused her. And her trauma resulted in her having a borderline personality. And I'll share a brief definition of that because there's confusion around that. And it's important because her treatment of me is responsible for who I am and for me developing 14 traits. So, borderline personality is a serious mental health disorder. And the signs and symptoms, I'm nervous, I need to breath. I'm still an adult child. The signs and symptoms that she exhibited were periods of stress-related paranoia and loss of contact with reality, an intense fear of abandonment, suicidal threats and behavior, wide mood swings, which can include intense happiness, irritability, shame, or anxiety, inappropriate, intense anger, such as losing her temper, being sarcastic, bitter, or having physical fights. And this is how she was all the time. And I never knew what was going to happen, which made me very hyper vigilant, and I have PTSD. And then on top of that, she drank. However, I think her drinking actually helped because I think it kind of helped her calm down. But bringing it back to me, that was the environment I grew up with, the insanity. And I was the product of her 3rd marriage to an alcoholic. And at the time, she had an 8 and 9-year-old. So I was unplanned, and my mother let me know that she didn't want me or love me. And she told me once that she rode a horse and did everything she could to get rid of me. She resented my very existence. And I made her life hard. So she shamed me. And she would complain to me that when I was a baby, that she had to stay up all night with me and had to go to work the next day without any sleep. And she also complained that she had to change my shitty diapers. And when she'd get angry at me, she'd call me a little shit ass or a snot nose. And this gave me shame around my basic bodily functions. And then when I was reaching puberty, she'd call me a slut and a whore. And this gave me shame around my sexuality. And no part of me was off limits for her to grade. And you know what? I've got to change this because this is really distracting me. Okay. I can see myself. I usually don't see myself when I talk. Okay. So I was basically ignored and spent a lot of time alone. And I have no memories of being held or read to. And when I would get hurt, I was never comforted. She'd ask, well, did you hurt the sidewalk or did you hurt this? Whatever it was I got hurt with, I never got the attention. So I learned there was no use crying as my pain was ignored, or she'd threatened to give me something to cry about. So the way that I handled this is I went to the opposite extreme and I shut my pain down and my feelings down. I'd get hurt and I wouldn't cry. And so I'd be tough, as strong as I could be. And I got praised for that behavior because that way she didn't have to be bothered with me. And I always felt that there had to be something wrong with me because I saw the neighborhood parents love and comfort their children. And I just didn't know what was wrong with me, why my mother couldn't love me, and what was it about me that was so unlovable. And here's a little bit of what that looked like. My mother would outright lie and twist the truth to manipulate us in situations. And because of her intense abandonment issues, she couldn't tolerate us to have any relationships with anyone with her. And she would say and do anything to interfere and destroy the relationship. And this played out hundreds of times, all the time, and that was normal. And I'll just share two short stories to kind of show her insanity. So when I was 5, I got beaten for telling the truth because I overheard my sister call my mother a bitch. And being a little girl, I tattled. And my mother twisted that, like she always did, and changed it to say that he called her a bitch and that she couldn't go out with him anymore. So of course all hell broke loose. There was a big fight, but I knew she got it wrong, and I kept trying to interject and go, no, he didn't say it, she did. And my mother grabbed me, drug me down the stairs, and gave me the biggest beating of my life, hitting and kicking me. And it didn't make sense. I was confused because I couldn't understand why I was getting beaten for telling the truth and for being honest. So, I was really lost and confused. And the next one was about a humiliation. Well, a lot of her everything was humiliating usually, but for not conforming. And that was my mother pretended to the world that she had money, property, and prestige. And she'd wear diamond rings, like on every finger. She had, and she'd wear a mink stole at real inappropriate times, which really embarrassed me. And she wanted her daughters to carry on this facade and to dress up and to give the appearance. And my sister bought into this, but I wasn't in it. I was a tough little girl playing football and baseball with the neighborhood boys. I wanted no part of that. So one day while I was playing, I split out the seat of my new short set. And when I got home, my mother was furious, and my sister joined in, and they told me that they were going to send me away to a boarding school because I couldn't take care of things. And of course I was terrified because this is over splitting my pants. And then my mother and sister stripped my clothes off of me and threw me outside naked, slammed and locked the door behind me. And I remember beating on the door, crying, and they wouldn't let me in. So I ran and hid in hid in the bushes so nobody'd see me. And I could see my mother and sister standing in the picture window. They were pointing and laughing at me, which was actually the worst part. So I was abandoned, shamed, and intensely afraid. So what was a constant from her was her demeaning and shaming statements. She'd say, "What's wrong with you? Can't you do anything right? You should be ashamed of yourself. Nobody's going to want you." And she'd say things to destroy my relationships with my friends and my boyfriends and say, "Oh, they're just using you. What do they want you for?" Or she'd cut them to shreds by saying demeaning things about them. So my life got even harder when I was 8 and my siblings left home. So it was just my father and I were left to be targets of her abuse. So when I was 12, my father divorced her. She told me that he wouldn't have left if he loved me. She made me feel that I was to blame, and it reinforced my feelings of worthlessness. Oops. And after the divorce, she tried to commit suicide by getting drunk and taking pills. And my sister and I had to get her on the ground and take them away from her. It was never talked about the next day or ever, as though it didn't happen at all. It was insanity, and it was a big don't talk. And then from 12 to 17, I was left alone with her, and this was the hardest time of all. We had terrible fights. She would say cruel things or lie to me. And then when I'd confront her, she'd say, "I don't know what you're talking about. I never said that." And this made me crazy because she was denying my reality. And to make sense of this, I thought my mother was schizophrenic because she seemed to have a split personality. And that was the only way I could try to understand. And due to the age difference of my siblings and my place in our ever-changing family, I ended up playing all of the different roles that adult children get thrust into. And I had learned this script. I had it memorized. Don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel. So I couldn't wait to get away from home. And so I left for college at 17. I was ill-equipped for adult life. I didn't have any healthy coping skills, and I had no idea of what normal was. In fact, that was something I was always asking my friends. I was always asking, "Is that normal? Is that normal?" Because I had honestly no idea. I was grabbing for normal. But it was the first time I was able to have relationships without my mother's interference. I was starved for love and affection, and I was very codependent. I mistook attention or kind words as love. Thus, I was easy to take advantage of. But despite these challenges, I was able to make it through college with a teaching degree to work with children with learning disabilities, kids who were just like me. And I was thriving, and I loved my job. And then when I was 27, I took a teaching job in Alaska. And I took the geographic cure, moving away from Kansas, thinking I could leave the past behind. And it was a very exciting time. I met an Alaskan man who introduced me to Alaska. He was attentive and affectionate, and I fell in love. I attended his big family gatherings, holidays, and was getting to be part of a real normal family. I was in heaven. But there were danger signs that I chose to ignore because I wanted the dream to be true. I should have turned around and ran, but I wanted the promise of having a normal family. And not listening to my gut feelings was the biggest mistake of my life. So at 29, we got married and I promptly had 2 children, all the while working full time. I was happy at the beginning, and then he turned off the charm. So predictably, just like the big red book says, I married into the same family system that I was raised in. The extended family that I thought was successful and normal was actually very dysfunctional and tribal. The abuse was different here, but it was subtle. It was oppressive, dismissive, and I was bullied with no one coming to my rescue, not even my husband. Because I already had low self-esteem, this treatment slowly chipped away the self-confidence and self-worth I had been able to develop. And my husband was a narcissist and had many of the same traits and behaviors as my mother, but they were just more covert. And just like my mother, he denied my reality with his deception and lies. He'd tell me that I said things or agreed to things that I didn't. And my codependence and desperate need to be loved made me easy to manipulate, and I was the perfect puppet. And instead of telling lots of stories, I found this perfect description that was actually exactly what I lived. It was as if it was his playbook. So this is what I lived for 32 years. There is no true healthy communication and problem solving with narcissists. Narcissists run from confrontation because they don't want to take responsibility for their part in anything. They gaslight and manipulate the conversation. They bring the focus back on you by bringing up what you did wrong in the past. They get mad at you for getting mad at them. Anything to take the focus off of them and avoid taking responsibility. And he added a step to this playbook. He used the weapon of leaving, abandonment. And my inner child couldn't take it, and I'd be so desperate for him to come back so that when he did return, I would drop the issue so nothing ever changed or was resolved. But I continuously tried to get him to be the husband that he promised to be, to honor our agreement of what I needed if I were to have children. He didn't work steadily or full-time, was fired twice, and most of the time, I brought home more money than he did. He put us into debt, wouldn't take responsibility for the children, the household, and spent many months every year away from the kids and I on hunting trips, different volunteering for hunting organizations, or to the cabin. And I was funding his trips, but I wasn't included. In fact, I didn't have money to go on trips. I had no idea what was happening to me. I was gaslighted, tricked, and I was just emotionally spinning. And predictably, I was living in all of the 14 traits of an adult child. I was powerless over them. And I'm going to share how these traits were expressed in my dysfunctional behavior and thoughts. And due to time restraints, I'm going to address just a few. So trait 2, we became approval seekers and lost our identity in the process. I was codependent, desperate to be loved and accepted. I became whoever I thought I needed to be, mold myself to fit someone else's preferences to the point that I no longer knew who I was or what I wanted. I would do almost anything for anyone, no matter the cost to myself. This included losing a large part of my inheritance and going into debt to cover up for my husband's financial infidelity. And because codependence isn't given out of love, I was extremely resentful and angry when what I was giving was not returned to me. I stuffed this anger and resentment in my body, and it affected my health to the extent that I had to retire early. 3, we were frightened by angry people and any personal criticism. I have PTSD and I get triggered by loud and angry people. And I tend to freeze, I hold my breath, and I gotta get away. People coming up behind me would make me scream. And my husband would use this to control me with his anger. He'd shut me down by yelling and bullying and his posturing. And I even took constructive criticism to heart, feeling I was wrong. It just reinforced my self-hatred that I couldn't do anything right. I couldn't accept compliments because I didn't feel that I deserved them. And 8, trait 8, we became addicted to excitement. This is the one that, boy, I did not understand, but boy, this was the hardest to work on, really. So because I was so shut down, it took strong emotions for me to feel anything. So I mostly lived in anxiety, and internally I'd spin, and sometimes I couldn't stop the spin. I mean, it would just go faster and faster. And the longer I'd go, the more and more upset I'd be. And that was a real dangerous place for me to be in. And I did not have the ability to calm myself down. And I constantly worried about interactions with other people. I worried about what they were thinking. Were they mad at me? I wondered if I did or said something wrong. I usually couldn't be present because I was in such a state of anxiety. I was addicted to romantic relationships with unavailable men. Both the beginning and the ending would keep me in a constant emotional spin. And for a while, I was a whitewater solo canoeist, which was thrilling, scary, and it made me feel alive. And I loved that excitement. So trait 10, we have stuffed our traumatic feelings from our traumatic childhoods and lost the ability to feel because it hurts so much, in denial. And deep down, I believed the lie that I was told as a child, that there was something inherently wrong with me. I was worthless and unlovable, that no one would want me. I was petrified to honestly look at what was happening in my marriage, that my husband didn't love me and it was my fault. This kept me in denial because I feared I couldn't handle the pain. And we judge, trait 11, we judge ourselves harshly and have a low self-esteem. And judging myself came in the package of a very critical parent. And this critical parent pretty much says what my mother said to me. Shade me messages, and I guess I don't need to repeat. I think you probably got that. 12, we're dependent personalities who are terrified of abandonment and will do anything to hold on to a relationship in order not to experience painful abandonment issues. Although I was miserable in my marriage and I wanted to leave several times, I was afraid. We went to 4 different marriage counselors, and one even told me to leave. And I couldn't. How could I leave when I believed that no one would ever want me? I thought I was unlovable and worthless, and I was stuck. 14, para-alcoholics are reactors rather than actors. I was wired, I need to drink, excuse me. I was wired in childhood to act quickly and avoid trouble and try to keep the peace. And I would react to situations verbally or actions with little thought of consequences. And this created continuous problems. Saying yes when I wanted to say no, abandoning myself, working hard to the point of exhaustion, and agreeing to things that were not thought out and ended up hurting me. Reacting kept me off balance. So, part 3, my recovery. And my recovery was made possible with me hitting a bottom. I was depressed, suicidal, and my thoughts were spinning. I couldn't go on fighting. It was a necessary bottom, and quite frankly, a beautiful bottom, because it made me stop fighting and surrender. It made me ready and willing to do anything to get out of the pain and my confusion. So in 2014, from the recommendation of a friend, I found my way to ACA, to my people, to my new family of choice. I couldn't believe how the big red book seemed to be written all about me, my life, my inner thoughts. How was that possible? After feeling so alone and misunderstood all my life, here I was reading about myself. ACA members shared the same thoughts and feelings that I had been feeling, and I was shocked and relieved. I learned that I had the same kinds of thoughts and feelings that every other human being on this earth has when brought up with abuse, abandonment, and shame. I learned that I had been conditioned to believe the lies of my childhood, that I was unlovable and worthless. I knew that I was in the right place. I followed the recommendations in the big red book, and I dedicated myself to going to meetings, reading the literature, using the telephone, and getting a sponsor. I believe my higher power helped me choose a sponsor who was perfect for me. She had a firm grasp of the steps and the traditions. She listened, she read with me, and had the gift to guide me to the very reading I needed at the time. She helped me to process what I was reading, to feel safe, and had to remind me to breathe many times. Early on, I realized that I couldn't work the steps without a belief in God or a higher power. And this was a really difficult task for me, as I had a lot of issues with God. My mother was always told me that I was going to go to hell, and I had always felt that God didn't listen to me and had abandoned me. So with a lot of soul searching and prayer, I was free to find my own higher power that was not attached to an organized religion. My higher power gave me guidance, comfort, and love. I was ready to work the steps. And working the ACA steps in the yellow workbook with my sponsor was transformative. I learned that I came from a long line of alcoholics and dysfunction, that it just got handed down from generation to generation. That toxic package was handed to my mother, and she handed it to me. And although I parented my children differently and I wanted it to be different, I handed them a toxic package too. And I came to understand that I couldn't have done anything else. I couldn't have done anything else. It was so freeing. I didn't have to beat myself up anymore. I could forgive myself. And with this new acceptance and understanding, I was able to love myself and feel worthy of love for the first time of my life. I then was able to become my own loving parent. And with my loving parent in place, I'm able to turn down the volume on my critical parent. It's not gone, but I have it in check most of the time. So, my new behaviors. My sponsor supported me throughout this transitional time. She would celebrate my victories with me, no matter how small. Although my changes appeared to be baby steps, they actually were giant steps. I was changing my habit of reacting to pausing and acting. When I would backslide or react to a situation, there was no shaming, only support. She reminded me that there would always be other opportunities to learn, to practice, to act next time. And she was right. The lessons kept presenting themselves until I was able to pause, discern, and act. The more I practiced, the more I could be present and act. And I can't emphasize enough how critical my sponsor was for me. Due to my deep denial and wounding, I honestly don't think I would have I honestly don't think I would have recovery without her support, love, and guidance. I would have recycled my old dysfunctional thinking had I tried to go it alone. And an integral part of gaining my confidence has been through doing service. I believe it boosted my recovery as I got to practice my new skills within the safe structure of the 12 traditions. Volunteering for the first time was the hardest for me because I was afraid I'd mess up. So I'm a sponsor and I've done service work at the group level, region level, WSO level, delegate. And because I have found my voice and my confidence right now, I'm speaking to you. And although my changes appeared to be baby steps, they actually were giant steps. I was changing my habit from reacting to pausing, giving myself valuable seconds, and then acting. When I'd backslide or react to a situation, there was no shaming, only support. She reminded me that there would be other opportunities to learn, to practice, to act next time. And she was right. The lessons kept presenting themselves until I was able to pause, discern, and act. The more I practiced, the more I could be present and act. And I can't emphasize enough how critical my sponsor was to me. Due to my deep denial and wounding, I honestly don't think I could have recovered without her support, love, and guidance. I would have just recycled my old dysfunctional thinking had I tried to go it alone. Service. An integral part of gaining my confidence has been through doing service. I believe it boosted my recovery as I got to practice my new skills within the safe structure of the 12 traditions. Volunteering for the first one was the hardest for me because I was afraid I'd mess it up. But I did fine, and any mistakes I made were no big deal. This was ACA, and we support each other. This positive experience enabled me to take other service positions. I'm a sponsor, and I have done service work at the group level, region level, and on the WSO committee level, and I've been a delegate. And because I have found my voice and my confidence, right now I'm speaking to you, and my speech will go around the world. And most of all, doing service is a beautiful way to give back to the ACA fellowship and program that helped me get my life back. And I have to admit that at the beginning of recovery, I didn't understand either serenity prayers because I had no idea what serenity was. I had to look it up in the dictionary, and I still didn't get it because I never really experienced it. I think getting to be in serenity is the best gift of recovery. Being in serenity allows me to be present, which is a beautiful place to be. I can only be happy in the present, laugh in the present, and love in the present. I use both serenity prayers as a tool basically every day. Saying both of the serenity prayers get me through basically every situation. If I accept the things I cannot change and I accept the people I cannot change, that covers everything. It reminds me that I can only control myself, and I'm then able to let go. And I remember reading the promises and thinking they were reachable. But thanks to ACA and working the program, I'm actually living in the promises today. I have my freedom and a whole new lifestyle. Since 2018, I've been living alone in my RV and traveling throughout the western United States, and drove up and down the Alcan to Alaska by myself. And I generally don't have a firm itinerary. I just love living spontaneously. I take it a day at a time with my higher power as my guide. I love exploring, seeing new country, visiting old friends, and making new ones. And because I'm now able to be present and calm, I'm able to see and experience things like never before. And of course, I get triggered and struggle with life's challenges. And I'm living through a pandemic and the future is uncertain. But now I have my higher power, I have the program, and I have friends who love me. All of my basic needs are met, and I'm going to be okay. So I've changed my former life script, and I'm breaking all the rules. I'm talking, I'm trusting, and I'm feeling. Thank you.
Denise, thank you so much. It was wonderful. Thank you. I'm sorry, but that's all the time we have tonight. So we'll have to move on to announcements. The 7 tradition states every ACA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. The 7 tradition also reminds us of the spiritual principle of giving, and of giving with a willingness to help another. We ask that you consider making a 7 tradition contribution to ACA World Services, or purchase an MP3 or commemorative medallion at shopadultchildren.org. I believe those links are going to go up in the chat for you in just a moment. At this time, I've asked Jamie to read the promises.
Promises. 1. We will discover our real identities by loving and accepting ourselves. 2. Our self-esteem will increase as we give ourselves approval on a daily basis. 3. Fear of authority figures and the need to people please will leave us. 4. Our ability to share intimacy will grow inside us. 5. As we face our abandonment issues, we will be attracted by strengths and become more tolerant of weaknesses. 6. We will enjoy feeling stable, peaceful, and financially secure. 7. We will learn how to play and have fun in our lives. 8. We will choose to love people who can love and be responsible for themselves. 9. Healthy boundaries and limits will become easier for us to set. 10. Fears of failure and success will leave us as we intuitively make healthier choices. 11. With help from our ACA support group, we will slowly release our dysfunctional behaviors. 12. Gradually, with our higher power's help, we will learn to expect the best and get it.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And thank you to everyone who shared today and was of service to make this global ACA World Convention come together. Please check the acawso.org website for information about these meetings and other MP3 recordings. And please, help me thank with a special thank you to our speakers, Conway, Amina, and Denise. Thank you so much. And finally, thank you to each of you, especially our newcomers. You always have a seat here, and you help us carry the message of ACA recovery. After the meeting, we will turn on chat for all participants to fellowship for the next 15 minutes or so. There is a session beginning at 11 o'clock our time, so I think it's 1 o'clock Eastern, ACA Global Without Borders. At this moment, let's close the meeting with an ACA Serenity Prayer that feels most comfortable to you. Take a deep breath. God,
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 Grant me the
Grant me
Grant me the serenity
to
accept the
to
people
accept people I cannot change,
the courage
the courage to change when I can,
and the wisdom.
and the wisdom to know that one is me.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank
Be
you.
kind,
Thank you,
gentle,
Stephen.
loving,
Thank you.
respectful.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
For sharing your story.